couple of Hody Joneses, there's a couple of carrots, there's a couple of Bella Betties going on. But I tell you what,
I don't think we're seeing any of them for the rest of the day. Let's be real.
Some other good news. Carrot is 5-1. The dream is real. I am
ridiculous.
like following this Carrot player so intensely. I don't care what is like undefeated. This Carrot is
pretty well. The Carrot though went X3, I believe.
Yes, so chances are we're going to be getting that deck profile later and like putting it up on one of our YouTube channels. But
yep,
very happy to hear a Carrot going 7-3 at an event. Like that just means that deck has been underexplored in the meta. Like no one knows what it does, and no one knows how to verse it. So that might be why it went 7-3. But honestly, like putting up good numbers and by yourself, that means that deck probably has the highest win rate in the tournament so far.
Yeah, well, that's what.
Alright, first up, Wonder and Milky. 4 rolls for each. These are your cheap early game minks to put your leader ability online. If you know what that leader ability is, Carrot, as long as you've got a mink on board, you can rest a 5 cost or less. That's the only cost, just having a mink on the board. So these low costs, that's your easiest path to getting that online ASAP. Wonder, you got 19 targets in the deck, so you can whiff, but it's not the end of the world if you do, because it's just a 1-drop mink that you can establish straight away, that gets your leader online. Milky, even though it's a 2k counter, its ability is great, so what you can do is you can rest it, and you get a rested Don back as active. So it gives you great utility in decks that can't remove it easily, and it can, it can help you out with some of your mid game and late game plays, which I'll get into a little bit later. Next up, Beppo, a 3-of, 2k counter. Effect is completely useless. It's a set 1 card. I don't even know what they were thinking when they printed this thing. It's supposed to play out a Heart Pirate, but for us, all it is a 2k mink. Some players, I've got a previous deck profile. So many commenters said the same thing. Why aren't you running the 5-cost Carrot 2k? It's better. I don't think so. This is your other best option for establishing a low-cost mink in like your 4-don turn, if you went second. And really just sometimes you just have to play it out because you want to be able to start freezing things immediately. If you don't see Wonder or Milky, sometimes you just have to bite the bullet and play a Beppo. Alright? I had a few games at Nats where I saw poorly and established him early, and he let me start locking down character straight away, and he ended up even swinging for game for a couple of. So, he's a character, does his thing, but mostly there for counter. Alright, next up, you've got your 2 4-ofs, your 5-drop Carrot, and your 5-drop Inarashi. Carrot, on play and when attacking, you can stun a 7-cost or less if it's rested. Inarashi does the same thing, except it's only on play and he hits 2 5-costs or less. If you're facing down, two rested characters and you're on your 5-don turn, play Carrot. Don't fall for the Inarashi play straight away, because yes, it's tempting to be able to prevent both of those characters from swinging next turn, but you need to keep up your momentum as Carrot. So playing out the Carrot that can then, have an attack next turn and, freeze the other character, and you can follow up with another Inarashi, like it keeps your momentum going up to that 10-don turn. Inarashi, like if you play that at the wrong time, you lose your momentum and your opponent can just like climb over you before you hit 10-don. So it's definitely, in some very niche circumstances, like Carrot's always going to be better. Last mink in the deck to make your 19, you got Sicilian. This guy is the GOAT. He's a set 2 wildcard. If you don't know what he does, you're already dead. So, what he does, he's a 2-cost, and then on play you pay 2 more Don, and basically what you can do is you can restand one of your rested mink characters. So it's an offensive card which essentially lets you double tap with a Carrot or an Inarashi. Carrot especially good for it because you can freeze 2 things because you get 2 attacks. I've had games where this card was, just my win ticket. It's some of those games, my opponent asked me what my leader did when I started, and then I played a Wander and I saw a Sicilian. Didn't take it because I knew if my opponent read it, they would be able to account for it. And since I didn't do that, saw one later and, basically clinched lethal off of them. So for 4-don, it's a great investment. It turns Carrot especially into an absolute menace. That's just the way that goes. Okay, next up, not a mink card, but your stage. So this is a mink support card. It's leader lock. Well, it's not necessarily leader lock because what it does is you can rest it and get a Don back if you're a mink. But what it does at the end of the turn is it lets one of your minks stand back up. So I love this card a lot. That's why it's in there as a 4-of, despite, you know, being a brick, you know, if you see more than one. But it's for decks that can't, you know, remove, like black or yellow, it turns Carrot into just this untouchable monster. And also being able to get that Don back allows you to, like, do some crazy plays that other decks don't have access to, which I'll probably talk about in a little bit. So next up, we have our last 2k counters, so 3 EZO. It's really just in there for the 2k. However, it does have utility because on play you can rest a 4 cost. I haven't used this card for effect in a long time, but essentially the logic behind putting it in there as a 3-of is it can essentially help you break through a turtling black-yellow Luffy or like a Lucci. Because, you know, if they've played a Sabo and they also play a Rebecca or a, you know, a Viola to try and, you know, turtle up, you can rest the Sabo with your leader ability, play out an EZO and rest the other blocker, and then you can just try and go over the top for lethal if they're just trying to buy that extra turn so they can kill you next turn. It basically, for 3 Don, allows you to penetrate that wall. So, you know, it's just good utility, but most of the time you're gonna, you know, you pitch Beppo for counter first, but it's 2k. So you got 10 2ks in the deck thanks to EZO. Speaking of counter, 2 0-cost events. It's just there to offset your bricks or, you know, seeing extra stages. I think 12 is a good number because, you know, you'd rather see 2 stages than none. But to also help with that problem, you've got a 4-of Barto blocker. So if you're not familiar with what this does, during your turn, if something gets rested, you can cycle a card. So you draw one, trash one. So he's a 3-cost blocker, 4k. He's got counter on him, so he's good just pitch in a fit. But this is a great way to get around not seeing, you know, your top end or your stage and being able to just cycle cards into it. Or if you've seen extra ones, being able to get out of that while also establishing a blocker. Good thing about Barto is you don't, like, suppose your opponent has no board. If you have a Milky, like, Barto will trigger off you resting your own Milky as much as it will your opponent's characters. So he's very easy to, you know, cycle with. And, you know, just maybe don't block with him the first time and do it a couple times. It's just good for searching at your top end as well if you're not seeing what you want to see when you want to see it. Alright, moving on. Next up, we have 4 5-drop Bonnies. Used to be it's a great card still, but this was definitely a more of a hero card when, you know, set 8 was still new. Because, you know, it would shut down Puddings and Katakuri because it can stop the 10 Don play by freezing a Don. But also, it's good in the deck because you can freeze just any character, no matter what its cost is if it's rested. So it's good for shutting down a Jack before you can hit it with a 10 cost. You know, other things like that. It's just, if you know, like, what your opponent wants to play a 10 cost, you know, at 10 Don, or even like maybe a Gecko or something when they're about to hit 8, you can just slow them down if you're, you know, trying to push. So we're up for the big boys. So we have Hody Jones for 3. We have 3 9-cost Zorro and 4 10-cost Doflamingo. So these are your big boys. This is your top end. So depending on, you know, what you're versing, these cards, they're your solutions to different things. Hody, this card does so much. You know, you can deny Bonnie lead, her ability. You can rest, you know, Don for Gum Gum Giant. You can punish an Enel that's trying to starve you and go down to 4 life so they can't, like, crack a carrot with a Gidatsu or something. Just lots of things like that. It's, you know, even if you just, you know, use it and clinch for lethal, like, you need an extra swing and you just throw out a rush character when you're already on the ropes. Hody's just a great card. Zorro. What's there to say, man? Like, Enel, Katakuri, Bonnie, Black Yellow Luffy, Purple Luffy. It just murders them if you can establish and resolve it. Because, you know, apart from Kingdom Come, there's just really very little answer to him for those decks. So, you know, if you've had a decent mid game, if you can establish a Zorro and resolve it, it's pretty much just GG. Like, there's not much they can do to get around that. And lastly, the 10-cost Dofi doesn't need a whole lot of explaining. It's just, this card will get you punched, but that's why you know it's good. So, ironically, this is the Dofi leader killer for me. You know, if you can keep even a single carrot, you know, on board into the end game and chain 2 or 3 of these together, it's pretty much just game over. Even if you're 0 life and, you know, you haven't been able to be very aggressive and they're still at 4 or 3 life or something like that, they just can't sustain it. Another fantastic thing about these big boys is they synergize so well with your restanding Don potential with, Stage and Milky. So Hody Jones, for example, you can obviously just swing bigger with it if you have a Milky and a Stage out because you get the 2 Don back, so you can essentially have 5 spare Don after playing it. One cool thing I've done with Hody before is, I've rested an opponent's Jack, and then I've restood 2 Don, poked 5 with my leader, thinking that, with my opponent taking it, thinking that I was going to, throw it all on Hody and swing it into the Jack. But what I did was just swing 8k at leader and then use my 5 Don to play a Bonnie and freeze the Jack going into the 10 Don Dofi to just keep it stunned forever. So that's a cool thing you can only do in Carrot because you get that Don back. Another cool thing you can do with Dofi, suppose you've got no board, like they've been clearing you, you can play out a Milky from hand for 2 Don. You can rest Earth to get the Don back. You can rest your Stage to get that other Don back. And then you can, you've now got a Mink, so you can rest something with your leader. And, suppose their leader's rested and they've got like a rested big body, you can now freeze all 3 of those things and, turn things around. Zorro, similar kind of thing. Since you can get, re-Don stand potential, you can leave 2 Don open, put everything under Zorro, swing, use his effect to, you're essentially using his ability for, 2 Don. Because you can swing, leave 2 Don open, restand, pay the other 2 to restand him again after that, and then you can even just get 1 Don back and attach it to him for that one last little bit of extra damage. So pretty cool. That's the deck list. Yeah, that's it. Peace.
I'll make sure to bring this up somewhere and just be like, all right, I'm going to nail down what possibilities this deck can do and why it's doing so well, how this functions, right? Like, because this is actually doing me in. Like, I don't know why this character's doing so well, but hey, look, it's a pilot behind it, I say.
Yep, for sure.
It's always good to see that sort of stuff. Yeah, so that's awesome. So we've got